As an IS video released last night showed, another British hostage, but with a different narrative altogether. World media yet again were forced to ask, why do they or don't they present the video to their audience? Yasmin Khatun has more.
Another video has been released by Islamic State, this time featuring British journalist John Cantley. With widespread criticism over the killings and threats made in previous videos, this one is slightly different. In this new video, IS used a British journalist to share their thoughts on media propaganda, which they depict to be coming from the West.
I'm going to show you the truth behind these systems and motivation of the Islamic State, and how the Western media, the very organization I used to work for, can twist and manipulate that truth for the public back home.
Different to videos previously seen, the British journalist says he will soon reveal facts about the group to counter its portrayal in Western media. Cantley promises to convey facts in a series of programmes, suggesting there will be further instalments. As news of the video's release broke, international media outlets had to debate amongst themselves as to whether the video should even be shared. Within half an hour of it being uploaded onto video sharing site YouTube, it had been taken down. This new video, amongst the four before it and various others, are deemed by many in the West to be a propaganda tool for the group. The video's release comes amid widespread criticism from British Muslim groups and imams, who earlier this week proposed the group be referred to as un-Islamic State.
Opportunity to convey...
With no mentioning of the threat made in their previous video, is this an attempt by IS to try and improve their image? Yasmin Khatun, The Report, Islam Channel.
Truth, as the Western media tries to drag the public back to the...
Well, to discuss this, I'm joined in the studio by Chris Nineham, the Vice Chair of the Stop the War Coalition. So, Chris, what do you make of this? It's kind of, it's almost like we're getting promised, Islamic State, the box set. There's going to be a series of videos. What do you make of it?
Well, I mean, they clearly are trying to create a slightly different image. They're trying to sort of politicise to some extent the debate around their own existence, around the situation in the Middle East. They're tapping into the anger that people in the Middle East and beyond feel against Western foreign policy in the past. So you can understand why they're doing it from their point of view.
And do you think that there's a difference? I mean, you can understand the argument where there's material on the video which is grossly offensive, which you can understand the television companies and the social media sites not wanting to portray. When such content isn't in it, when it's essentially a guy behind a desk speaking, quite possibly under duress, I think we have to say. Do you think that is a different case and that should be allowed to be seen? I mean, I guess in some ways we're back to the kind of discussion that we used to have when the British media wouldn't allow Gerry Adams and the IRA, then thought it was a terrorist organisation, to be heard on the radio. How do you feel about that debate?
Well, I mean, I think there's a number of different elements here. One element of this is that I think we presumably have to assume that the journalist is acting under duress, and I think that does make it a different situation. This is not simply a political case being put in a straightforward way, and in that sense, I think it's absolutely right that at the minimum, this video should be presented with a strong health warning and with a series of, distance in terms of a sense of distance in terms of what it really is. Because funnily enough, he speaks in a sort of slightly rather convincing way. His manner is quite convincing, and I think it needs to be said this probably is done under duress. That's important. I think also we have to take into account that the debate about propaganda is being presented in a slightly one-sided way here. We get a huge amount of propaganda from the West in terms, and we have had in the whole period of the war on terror, the last 13 years of the war, we've had a whole series of staged propaganda exercises that have turned out to be based on deceptions from the West as well, and that needs to be thrown into the discussion here. The crucial thing is, though, we have to move on to a serious discussion about the origins of IS, why IS exists in the first place, what underpins it, and therefore how it can be dealt with. And it seems to me that's the way in which decisions about what is shown and what isn't shown have to be framed.
Is there now a problem coming from your point of view, from somebody who wants to stop the bombing and stop the sort of escalation of the conflict in the Middle East? Is there a difficulty now that exists that didn't exist back in the original invasion of Iraq, say, because IS are a grotesque organisation? Then we were told that there was an enemy that proved not to be quite how it was portrayed. Indeed, it was a war conducted largely on lies. But when people say that the IS are a grotesque organisation, they're right.
No, I think that's true, and I think this will make the argument somewhat harder. It clearly is a very reactionary, an ultra-sectarian organisation, which is causing mayhem in the region. So I think that will make things harder. However, having said that, back in 2002, 2003, there was a huge amount of propaganda, and a huge amount of very strong argument put that military action had to be used to get rid of Saddam Hussein, who was a dictator. And that was a difficult argument at the time, and I think we had to mount a whole series of discussions and arguments and put a counter position to say that, and this was the fundamental sort of crux of our argument, is you can't bring democracy, you can't bring peace, you can't bring justice through bombing raids or invasions, and that's the argument we have to get back to. The fact of the matter is, however reactionary ISIS are, that military action, military intervention by the West is going to make the situation worse. It's probably going to strengthen ISIS, and by the way, that's one of the things that we need to think about here, is that I think one of the things they're doing is trying to provoke Western intervention. It's likely to strengthen IS, and it's likely to further fragment and tear the country apart. And bottom line, one thing it's definitely going to do is it's going to kill civilians. And it was interesting just, I think, yesterday or the day before, that the civilians in Raqqa, which is a city that is threatened by the IS, were saying publicly, we don't want bombing because we know that civilians are going to be killed, and this is one of the things that we have to put right to the front of the debate. OK, well, Chris Nineham from the Stop the War Campaign, thanks very much. But I'm afraid that's all we've got time for on tonight's programme. I want to thank all my guests for being here, and to thank you at home for watching. Remember, you can keep up with our Twitter conversation on all tonight's stories by tweeting @IslamChannel and using the hashtag #TheReport. Well, we'll be back on Monday at the same time, but for now, we'll leave you with some footage of that moment when the news stations around the world reported on the Scottish vote for independence. We'll be back next week. Good night.